first on the Pac-12 side of things, the drop dead date to have an entire season for the Pac-12 and college football in your mind is?
I think it's actually going to be able to be pushed really late, to be honest. Like the Olympics had to get postponed. And I just, Ted and I talked about it yesterday on our podcast because Ted Robinson is such an acclaimed broadcaster within the Olympic Games. Yep. You had to do it because people are flying from everywhere. The preparation, you have to qualify for it. Right now, and I've talked to coaches around our conference and strength trainers, they're doing their best to keep kids engaged as teachers. The NCAA permits 2 hours per week in the off season where coaches can meet with their student athletes. So they're taking advantage of that now with spring ball being canceled. So they're still installing their defense at USC, for instance, with Todd Orlando. I'm sure the same at Arizona State, both sides of the ball. They're taking advantage of it. So I don't think it's like June 1st. To me, I think we'll have an idea June 1st. If this thing hasn't flattened, if we're not feeling safe, then, I'd imagine we could probably foreshadow to a degree, but I think you can wait all the way up until August. I think there's a world where maybe you don't play non-conference games, and everybody has to just play 8 or 9 conference games. Imagine that for the Pac-12 conference, right? You don't play Ohio State, Michigan, Alabama, Notre Dame, the 4 biggest non-conference opponents from the respective teams in the conference. So I'm not freaking out on that regard. I'm sure the conference and college football probably follow an element of what the NFL does. So I'd imagine the NFL is going to wait till the last possible moment, and maybe we get an abridged training camp. So yeah, I don't think there's a hard date that we're talking like May 15th or anything like that, like we've seen, specifically around the Olympics.
Spring football had a lot of fans that have asked, does this hurt ASU, U of A, help ASU, U of A? Where do you come down on not having spring football at all?
Well, they got a couple, right? I mean, ASU got the most practice out of anybody in the conference. U of A got they get 2 in maybe, I think, 1 or 2. I think it hurts them for sure, especially I've known Paul Rhodes since I was 18 years old. He was my defensive coordinator when I was at Pitt, the new D coordinator there. You look at that, pretty much that whole side of the ball is brand new. So there's an element there, but there's a lot of programs in the conference that are going to feel that, right? Look at Colorado, for instance. Brand new everything as late as you could possibly imagine, at least as late as we've seen in the history of college football, to my recollection of a coaching change, in terms of the calendar. So I think it's going to hurt them. I think it's going to hurt everybody. I think ASU, with the amount of players they have coming back, I mean, I keep a schedule to my left here, and I predict the games, and I think they'll win at least 9 games next year. And I think a lot of it is because of their defense. We're talking about multiple 3-year starters who are third-year players. Obviously, offensively, they're bringing back a lot. There were rave reviews around the 2 young running backs that came in mid-year enrollees. Receivers, they've got depth. So out of all the teams, like I'm probably most confident in that, in Arizona State. And when I look at the entire Pac-12 landscape, I'm honestly, like, you can go down the list. Oregon is the favorite, but they lost so much on the offensive front and quarterback. You got to be cohesive there. Spring ball, those 15 practices do that. You look at UW, brand new scheme, at least on the offensive side, and the quarterback will have taken less than 30 snaps in his career, if 0, at the 3 guys that are looking at it. So you're looking at the mainstay programs. They needed this more so than ASU, in my opinion, because of the changes. So out of everybody, Arizona State's probably in pole position in terms of comfort level.
One other question on the field with ASU, and that is Jaden Daniels. From what you saw in year number 1, what's his ceiling? Where do you think he can go?
Yeah, that's a great question. I can't wait. Next week, I've got slotted on my calendar during our rest period in our class day. I'm going to watch every critical snap of every quarterback returning. So that's third down, red zone, backed up. So I'll be able to give you like some really cool cut-ups next week, which you'll dig. But I got to see Jaden on spring break. He came to the Elite 11 camp in Los Angeles. He came with his mom. And I went right up to him. I was like, man, like he's never going to fill out like Andrew Luck. Like, that's just not his body type. But he'll fill out, to me, like Jared Goff filled out. And Jared Goff still, to this day, is still growing. And you get to see him in the offseason and watch his body develop. Jaden's the same way. So he was very much like Jared as a freshman, about 170 pounds, soaking wet. And you could tell he put on some weight. And I always go to quarterbacks. For me, it's the lower body. And if you did side by side, and we'll do this to start off the games next year if I'm calling, if they go Thursday night, their first game of the year, and I'm on it, we'll take drops from Jaden Daniels. And the biggest area of development, I think, for quarterbacks is their leg strength and lower body strength. And when you're dropping as a freshman, you're usually a little slower. The explosiveness isn't there. When I saw him, you could tell that that's an area for him that he'll grow. So you'll see him subtly move in the pocket, and that's his game. That's where he can really thrive, where it's over one, up one, avoid the rusher, drop a dime down the sideline. And he knows how to manipulate the pocket. He showed that as a freshman. So to answer the question about the ceiling, he's got a chance to be one of the best, if not the best of all time, at that institution, based on everything around him, the tutorship and mentorship that he has, and the program. I mean, we need to talk about ASU no longer as the sleeping giant, but as a legit contender in the Pac-12 conference for a Rose Bowl bid. And I think that's a fair statement to make about this team this year, next year, maybe even the following year. And we'll see what happens with Herm. Does he continue on after the Jaden Daniels era there? We'll see. But the program is in the best position and the healthiest in my eyes that I've ever seen it. And I've been in this league almost 20 years now, from the Pac-10 to today. So Jaden's ceiling, he's got a chance to be the best one that I've seen personally in the last 20 years and get in the conversation of the Jake Plumbers of the world.
Wow.